Why do you keep starting over again and again?
It's a heavy question.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I want you to just sit with that question for a moment. Just, think about the feeling. You get
Mhm.
this sudden, really powerful surge of energy. Usually it happens on like a Sunday night, right?
Oh, always a sunny day, without fail.
Right. You find yourself standing in a store or maybe browsing online, and you buy a brand new expensive planner. You set your phone alarm for like 5 a.m. You march into your kitchen, throw away all the junk food in your pantry, and you just swear to yourself, this time is going to be different. I'm finally going to stick with it.
And the wild thing is, for a few days, or maybe even a couple of weeks, it actually is different. You feel completely unstoppable.
Exactly. But then, well, life does what life always does. It gets messy. You miss a single day because maybe you had a migraine, or you have a stressful afternoon at work and you slip up and eat something you swore you wouldn't.
Yeah, the friction of reality hits you.
Yeah. And suddenly, almost instinctively, you are throwing the entire master plan into the garbage. You tell yourself that you ruined it, and you'll just wait for next Monday or the first of next month to start completely from scratch. But what if the problem isn't that you fail, but how your brain fundamentally processes the concept of failure?
That cycle is incredibly heavy.
Mhm.
And, so many people carry that exact burden in complete silence. They think they're the only ones who can't seem to get their lives together.
It's just so heartbreaking.
It is.
Yeah.
Because we're swimming in a cultural narrative that insists success is purely a matter of sheer willpower, right? Just grit and grinding through the pain. The constant message is that if you just push harder, if you're just a little bit more ruthless with your own schedule, you'll finally break through.
But that's just not true, is it?
No, no, no. When we actually peel back the layers of the psychological and biological sciences of human behavior, it reveals a completely different reality. It's a much more compassionate story, but also a much more mechanically complex one.
Which is exactly why we're doing this deep dive today. We're intentionally stepping away from the loud, high-pressure hustle culture noise. Instead, we're going to look at a very specific stack of sources to understand what is actually happening in your brain.
We have some incredible data to go through today.
We really do. We're pulling from clinical behavioral science, including studies from Stanford University researchers, comprehensive data on motivation from SciPost, cross-cultural psychological reviews, neurological papers on the nervous system, and even real, deeply vulnerable human stories from Reddit communities and YouTube essays.
It's a really comprehensive look at the human mind.
Yeah. And our mission today is to gently explore the real reasons we get trapped in this loop of constantly restarting. And more importantly, how to finally break free from it. It always makes me think of the feeling of buying a brand new notebook.
The pristine first page, it is such a universal experience.
Yes.
That untouched paper holds so much promise. It represents the absolute potential of who you are about to become.
Exactly. You sit down at your desk, you smooth out that first crisp page, and you write out your grand life goals in your absolute best, most careful handwriting.
With the good pen.
Yes, with the good pen. It looks flawless, it feels like a fresh identity. But then maybe you get to page 2 or 3, and your pen slips. You misspell a word. You have to aggressively cross something out, making this ugly, jagged blue ink mark on your perfect page.
And in an instant, the magic just evaporates.
The notebook feels tainted. Instead of just turning the page, accepting the messy reality, and continuing to write your story, you feel this overwhelming urge to rip the page out entirely. Or worse, you want to throw the whole notebook in the trash and go buy another brand new one, just so you can chase that perfect, flawless feeling again.
The mechanism driving that urge for a pristine slate is actually a deeply wired psychological phenomenon. Behavioral scientists have a formal term for it. It's called the fresh start effect.
The fresh start effect. Okay, break that down for us.
Yeah, so there's a foundational piece of literature published in Management Science by researchers Dye, Milkman, and Rees that explains this beautifully. They studied how human beings utilize what they call temporal landmarks to navigate their goals and their self-perception.
Let me just make sure I understand. When you say temporal landmarks, you mean specific markers in time, like Mondays or New Year's Day, or maybe the first day of a new school semester.
Exactly. The researchers found that these specific dates act as psychological dividing lines. They essentially create a mental barrier, like a locked door, between our past self and our future self.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. The past self is the version of us that we feel has failed. The one who procrastinated, the one who didn't go to the gym. The future self is the one we envision as flawless, disciplined, and highly capable.
So it's like a clean break.
Yes. When we cross one of these temporal landmarks, like waking up on January 1st, we are neurologically closing the chapter on our past mistakes. It provides a sudden, incredibly liberating sense of distance from all of our previous disappointments. We get to reframe our entire self-concept.
Okay, so when I look at the calendar on a Thursday and I realize I've eaten terribly all week and I say, okay, I'm going to get my diet together starting on Monday, I am literally trying to sever ties with the version of me that struggled yesterday.
That is exactly the goal.
Yeah.
I am attempting to leave that person behind in the past. And in the very short term, that separation provides a massive psychological boost.
Because it feels good to leave the baggage behind.
It does. It's highly effective at helping us overcome the initial inertia of starting something new. We feel a profound surge of optimism because, in that specific moment, our brain is tricking us into believing we are no longer burdened by our history.
But there's a catch, obviously.
A huge one. We have to look at the shadow side of this mechanism. The feeling of starting over becomes intoxicating. One of our sources, a really insightful behavioral analysis from a YouTube creator who focuses on identity, put it perfectly. They said people become addicted to becoming.
Addicted to becoming. Wow, that hits a nerve.
It's powerful phrasing, right?
It really is.
Yeah.
Because the act of starting really does feel incredible. You get this massive dopamine rush just from the mere idea of the new you.
Before you've even done anything hard.
Exactly. You haven't actually done any of the difficult, unglamorous work yet. You haven't woken up early, you haven't sweat, you haven't studied. But your brain is already flooding your system with reward chemicals just for making the schedule.
The brain is very easily tricked by novelty. That chemical dopamine rush completely masks the reality of the journey ahead. You are riding a neurological high driven purely by the newness of the fresh start.
But the newness can't last.
Right. Novelty, by its very definition, cannot last. Once the calendar turns, once the newness wears off and the behavior becomes a routine expectation, that initial surge of dopamine inevitably drops off.
And then what happens?
Well, if you're relying entirely on that chemical high to push you forward without a deeper system in place, the crash isn't just a possibility, it's a biological inevitability.
We actually found a perfect, though somewhat painful, example of this crash in real life while we were researching. I was reading through a thread on the Get Disciplined subreddit the other day, and this user, who goes by the name Historical Coyote 56, shared a story that I think almost everyone listening will relate to on a visceral level.
Oh, yes, I remember reading that one. It was so painfully relatable.
It really was. They described getting highly motivated and building these immaculate, hyper-detailed daily schedules. They would map out their entire life in 15-minute increments.
15 minutes. That's so intense.
Right. They wrote down exactly when they would wake up, when they would do a grueling workout, how they would eat perfectly clean meals all day, and how they would focus flawlessly on their career goals for 8 hours straight. On paper, it was an absolute masterpiece of human productivity.
It is the ultimate manifestation of that future perfect self we just discussed.
Yes.
But the inherent flaw in that blueprint is that it leaves absolutely zero room for the friction of being a biological human being in an unpredictable world.
And that friction always shows up. A bad day at work drains their cognitive energy, a stressful family text message throws off their mood, or maybe they just didn't get enough deep sleep one random Tuesday night.
And the whole house of cards falls down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Suddenly, that rigid, perfect plan shatters. They sleep through the 5 a.m. alarm, they miss a workout, they eat something off plan for lunch, and instead of just saying, okay, that was a messy morning, I'll just adjust my afternoon, they stop following the plan entirely.
The mental notebook is ruined.
The notebook is ruined. They slip right back into their old, comfortable habits. Then they spend weeks in a state of self-loathing, feeling deeply guilty, until the pain of staying the same becomes too much.
And then they pick themselves up to try another restart.
Yep. But they always feel like they're starting from absolute zero with no real progress to show for all that emotional agony.
If we zoom out and look at the architecture of that loop, it is a devastating cycle of emotional whiplash. It always begins with unsustainably high expectations fueled by a temporary dopamine spike.
Right.
Then, the inevitable loss of momentum occurs because life introduces variables you cannot control. That loss of momentum leads directly to feelings of failure, which leads to quitting. And finally, you're left with that sinking, heavy feeling of being stuck in repetition, entirely convinced that every ounce of your previous effort was completely erased.
If you are listening to this right now and you recognize that loop in your own life, I want to pause and say something very clearly to you. You probably think you just lack discipline.
So many people believe that about themselves.
They do. When you're alone in your car or lying awake at night, you probably tell yourself that you are lazy, or that you are weak, or that you just don't have the grit that successful people have. But you don't. None of those things are the real issue.
They truly aren't. We have to look at the hidden, mechanical truth beneath this behavior. You are not restarting because you are a weak person.
Thank you. I feel like we all need to hear that 100 times.
It's the truth. You are restarting because your biological and psychological systems are functioning exactly as they evolved to function over hundreds of thousands of years.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, the conflict arouses because those ancient systems are operating in a modern context. Modern society demands constant, linear, upward progress, which is something our brains were absolutely never designed to handle.
Okay, I want to push on that a bit. What does that actually mean for our brains when we try to change a habit? Why is the simple act of, trying to eat better or wake up earlier so biologically alarming to us?
To understand that, we have to look at insights from evolutionary psychology. This was covered thoroughly in an article we analyzed from Addicted to Success. Basically, our brains fundamentally misinterpret the concept of challenge.
Misinterpret how?
Well, across the vast stretch of human evolution, discomfort didn't mean personal growth or career advancement. Discomfort meant clear, immediate, and present danger. If you were cold, hungry, exhausted, or confused in the wilderness, your actual physical survival was actively threatened.
So feeling uncomfortable was basically a death sentence.
Exactly. Fast forward to today. When you start a new habit, let's say a complex new coding project at work, or a demanding physical fitness routine, and you hit that inevitable phase where progress is slow, or you feel confused, or your muscles ache, your brain doesn't know it's the year 2026.
Right, it's still living on the savannah.
Yes. It instinctively shifts into self-preservation mode.
So it's treating a modern, self-imposed goal like an ancient predator creeping through the grass.
It is the exact same alarm system. The amygdala, which is the fear center of your brain, interprets the struggle of learning or changing not as an opportunity to become a better version of yourself, but as an actual physiological threat to your survival.
Oh, wow.
It directly equates the discomfort of effort with danger.
That is wow. So when I try to wake up at 5 a.m. to go for a run in the freezing cold, and my body feels heavy, my lungs are burning, and I just feel awful, my prefrontal cortex might rationally be saying, this is hard right now, but it is excellent for our long-term cardiovascular health.
But the older, more primitive parts of your brain are literally screaming.
They're screaming, we are in pain, we are losing body heat, this is a dangerous situation, we need to stop running and retreat to the warm cave immediately if we want to survive.
That is the biological reality of what you are fighting. It is a deeply ingrained protective response.
It's just trying to keep me alive.
Exactly. And to add another layer of context to this, I was reading a fascinating cross-cultural psychological review recently looking at research out of Vietnam. They use a specific term for this phenomenon, tri tratum li, which translates directly as psychological inertia.
Psychological inertia.
Like in physics.
Exactly like in physics. We know inertia is the resistance of an object to any change in its velocity, right? A body at rest stays at rest.
Sure.
In psychology, it's the natural baseline human tendency to maintain the status quo, to stay exactly where you are, doing exactly what you have always done, unless a massive, overwhelming psychological force compels you to move.
It's the ultimate path of least resistance. Our brains, which consume a massive amount of calories just to function, simply want to conserve energy by running familiar routines.
And that energy conservation is a powerful, heavy force. The researchers note that in extreme clinical environments, this inertia is linked to a symptom called avolition.
Avolition, what is that? It's a profound, debilitating lack of drive seen in certain severe mental health conditions. Now, to be clear, the everyday inertia you experience when trying to start a diet isn't the same as clinical avolition.
Right. It's a spectrum.
Exactly. Yeah. But looking at that extreme end of the spectrum shows us just how deeply rooted our neurological resistance to change really is. It takes immense, conscious, cognitive energy to override the status quo. Your brain is actively fighting against you to keep you safe, comfortable, and predictable.
That makes the identity conflict we face when trying to change make so much more sense. Our YouTube source broke this identity struggle down in a way that gave me full-body chills.
Oh, I love that part of the video.
Right. They explain that when you are trapped in the start and stop cycle, you're essentially trying to live two competing identities at the exact same time.
A total split in the self.
Yeah, one version of you, the future you, deeply wants growth. That version sees the grand vision, feels the impact of what you could achieve, and desperately wants to evolve. But the other version of you is deeply attached to what is safe, what is familiar, and what is known.
And we have to remember the hierarchy of the brain. Safety to those primitive areas will always be prioritized over self-actualization. Self-actualization, pursuing your dreams, is a biological luxury. Survival is a necessity.
But wait, I have to challenge this. Humans do incredibly dangerous, uncomfortable things for self-actualization all the time.
That's true.
Like people climb Mount Everest, people run ultramarathons through the desert. We clearly choose discomfort. So how does that fit into a brain that only wants to stay safe on the couch?
That is a brilliant pushback. The difference lies in how the brain perceives the reward versus the threat, and how deeply the behavior is tied to identity.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Think about the person climbing Everest. They've usually spent years aligning their core identity with being an elite mountaineer. To them, not climbing would be a threat to their ego and identity. Their brain perceives the achievement as vital to who they are.
Okay, I see.
But for the average person trying to force a new habit they secretly hate, like suddenly deciding to run 3 miles a day when they despise running, the brain sees only unproven threat.
Because it's not part of who they are yet.
Exactly. Think about it this way. Your brain views your old, lazy identity as a proven survival strategy. You survived being that person yesterday. You survived being that person the year before. The new identity, the person who takes risks, who wakes up early, who puts themselves out there, is completely unproven. Therefore, it is inherently risky.
So when I get tired and quit, my brain isn't trying to punish me, it's simply trying to rescue me from the unknown.
Yes, it's pulling you back to safety.
Okay, so the brain has good intentions. It is trying to act as our bodyguard. But how does that bodyguard turn into a prison guard? What is the bridge between the brain keeping us safe and the painful self-sabotage of quitting and feeling like a complete failure?
That bridge is built almost entirely out of the unrealistic standards we set for ourselves, and how those standards trigger severe anxiety.
Ah, perfectionism.
Yes, we inadvertently activate this protection mode by being brutal, unforgiving perfectionists. There is a deeply revealing study from the Journal of Language Teaching and Research by Pishgatam and Akanpur that examined how perfectionism actively destroys progress.
And they looked at foreign language learners, right?
Yes, which is a brilliant, highly vulnerable context for this phenomena.
Language learning is the perfect petri dish for this, because you literally cannot do it perfectly at first. It is impossible to speak a new language without stumbling, mispronouncing words, and sounding a little foolish. The vulnerability is baked right into the process.
It is unavoidable. You have to be messy to learn. But the researchers observed that perfectionistic students set impossibly high standards for their performance. They operated on strict all-or-nothing evaluations.
Like either I sound like a native speaker or I'm a failure.
Exactly. If they couldn't speak with a flawless native-level accent immediately, they labeled themselves as total humiliating failures.
That's so harsh.
It is. And what happens internally is that this mindset triggers intense state and trait anxiety. The learners become so deeply afraid of making a mistake, so terrified of the negative evaluation from their peers or their teacher, that they begin to exhibit profound avoidance behaviors.
Avoidance behaviors? Like what?
They procrastinate on assignments, they start skipping class entirely, or they sit in the back of the room and remain completely silent. The anxiety literally paralyzes their cognitive ability to learn.
Because if you don't open your mouth to speak, you can't mispronounce a word.
Exactly. You can't fail if you don't try.
You protect your fragile ego by withdrawing completely, but you also ensure you never learn the language.
Right. And we need to talk about the severe neurological cost of this kind of perfectionism. It isn't just an emotional feeling. It is a physical, chemical event in your brain.
Really? A chemical event?
Yes. A paper from Chem Street Partners outlines the hidden battle taking place within our nervous systems when we try to force intentional change. When we operate out of fear of failure, or when we try to force ourselves to become what they term the ought self.
The ought self.
Yeah, which is the person we think society or our parents or our Instagram feed expects us to be. When we try to be that person, we trigger the sympathetic nervous system, the SNS.
That's our classic fight or flight response, right? The adrenaline system.
Yes, the SNS is our physiological alarm bell. When it is activated by the relentless pressure to be perfect, it floods your body with the stress hormone cortisol.
And cortisol is notorious for causing burnout.
It is, and here's a mechanical tragedy of it. High, sustained levels of cortisol actually block neurogenesis.
Wait, what does that mean?
Cortisol interacts with the hippocampus, which is the learning center of the brain, and causes the dendrites, the little branches connecting your neurons, to literally shrink and retract.
Wait, really? It physically alters the brain structure?
Yes, it physically prevents your brain from forming the new neural pathways required to learn a new habit or adopt a new behavior.
That is terrifying.
It gets worse. Furthermore, the SNS narrows your thought processes, causing you to fixate entirely on the perceived threat, the fear of failing, rather than allowing you to see alternative solutions or creative paths forward. You are literally, biologically, burning your brain out by trying to force change through fear and rigid discipline.
That is mind-blowing, and we completely missed the other half of that equation in the outline, which is the parasympathetic nervous system, the PSNS. How does that factor into this?
It is the crucial counterbalance. If the ought self triggers the panic of the SNS, pursuing your ideal self, the person you genuinely, authentically want to be, aligned with your true values, activates the parasympathetic nervous system.
The rest and digest system.
Exactly. When you approach a goal with curiosity and self-compassion, the PSNS releases acetylcholine, which lowers your heart rate and signals to your amygdala that you are safe.
And when the brain feels safe.
Neurogenesis opens up. The hippocampus can freely build new neural connections. You literally cannot learn effectively unless your nervous system feels secure enough to do so.
That completely shatters the dominant hustle culture advice we see everywhere.
Completely shatters it.
I want to contrast two specific viewpoints we found in our research because it perfectly illustrates the difference between burning out the SNS and aligning with the PSNS. On one side, we have this very toxic, aggressive view of discipline.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, going back to that Reddit thread, there was a comment from a user giving advice to the person struggling, and I wrote it down because it was just so jarring. They said, "You have to declare war on that child inside you. Becoming someone new is violent."
That phrasing, becoming someone new is violent, is deeply concerning from a physiological standpoint.
It sounds exhausting.
It is a recipe for the exact sympathetic nervous system burnout we just unpacked. It frames self-improvement as an act of internal trauma. It assumes you must hate your current self enough to destroy it.
And then we contrast that aggressive stance with the insights from our YouTube source, which offered a deeply aligned, compassionate view.
The concept of self-abandonment.
Yes. They argued that forcing things without internal alignment isn't discipline at all. It's what they called self-abandonment. True discipline shouldn't feel like you are going to war with yourself every single morning. It shouldn't require cortisol.
It should feel like alignment. It should feel like you are finally stepping into who you actually are, gently and purposefully.
And we must strive for that gentle alignment because, honestly, we simply do not have the conscious metabolic energy to fight a war every day. We are not built for it.
We really aren't. Dr. Paul McCarthy's research on habit formation highlights a very humbling reality regarding human behavior. He notes that up to 65% of our daily decisions are made entirely on autopilot by a primitive golf ball-sized region of the brain called the basal ganglia.
65%.
Yes.
That means more than half of everything I do today. What I eat, how I react to an email, my posture is happening without me actively, consciously deciding to do it.
It's astonishing, isn't it? The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for complex decision-making and willpower, uses an enormous amount of glucose. To save energy, the brain takes any repeated behavior and offloads it to the basal ganglia, turning it into an automatic routine, like a macro on a computer.
So it's an efficiency mechanism.
Exactly. That means you only have conscious, deliberate control over a very small fraction of your day. Relying on sheer willpower to force yourself through the day fails because of a phenomenon called ego depletion, which is essentially decision fatigue.
Right, because willpower isn't infinite.
Your willpower is not an endless well. It is a finite, easily drainable battery. If you drain that battery fighting a violent war against yourself all morning, trying to force behaviors that feel unnatural to your basal ganglia, you will have absolutely nothing left in the tank by 6 p.m. when you're tired and hungry.
It's like relying on a single deep breath to swim across an entire ocean.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, like it works for a minute. You feel incredibly strong and capable when you first dive in off the dock, but eventually, inevitably, you are going to run out of air and your muscles are going to give out. You need a boat.
You need a boat.
You need automated systems, structures, and habits that carry you forward when you are simply too exhausted to swim anymore.
That analogy captures it perfectly. And to truly understand why we abandon the swim and desperately head back to shore, we need to look at how this psychological collapse actually looks in real time.
Because it happens fast, doesn't it?
It does. Quitting doesn't usually happen after weeks of slow deliberation. The actual decision to quit often happens in a split second, triggered by a very specific shift in attention.
Our source material from Psychology Today shared a deeply relatable story from Dr. Alex Lickerman that illustrates this exact split-second collapse.
I love this story. It's so revealing.
It really shows how vulnerable the mind is during moments of physical or emotional discomfort. So Dr. Lickerman is an avid runner, but he had been forced to take a 4-month break due to a painful knee injury.
And anyone who runs knows 4 months off is basically starting over.
Totally. So when he finally healed and got back out there, he attempted his usual 4-mile route around downtown Chicago. Now, as you would expect after 4 months of deconditioning, it was physically grueling.
I can only imagine the Chicago weather wasn't helping either.
Probably not. He described his breath coming in ragged gasps, his legs feeling like they were made of lead, every single step requiring immense effort.
But he was doing it.
He was. Here's the fascinating part of the story. He was managing the pain perfectly fine for most of the run. His mind was wandering, he was locked into a rhythm, and he was successfully pushing through the discomfort.
Right, he was in the zone.
Until he hit mile 3.75.
Just a quarter of a mile from the absolute end of his goal.
Right. He rounds the last corner of his loop. He can probably visually see the intersection where his route ends. And suddenly, his mind does something very curious.
It snaps out of the present.
It snaps back from wherever it was wandering, realizes exactly where he is, and starts projecting forward into the future. He begins vividly anticipating the end of the run. He starts visualizing stopping, catching his breath, and feeling the relief of being done.
What's crucial here is identifying the precise psychological turning point. The exact moment Dr. Lickerman's attention shifted from managing the present pain of the run to anticipating the future relief of stopping, his tolerance for the present moment completely collapsed.
He wrote that the idea of the pain ending, the seductive idea of relief, became so enticing, so overwhelming that he desperately wanted to stop right then and there.
And he did.
He did. He quit walking just short of his goal. But the physical pain he was experiencing at mile 3.75 wasn't objectively any worse than the pain he was experiencing a few minutes earlier at mile 3.5. His muscles hadn't suddenly failed.
The physical obstacle hadn't changed in that fraction of a mile. What changed was his psychological attention.
It's all mental.
This story reveals a profound universal truth about why we quit our goals. We don't quit because an obstacle is objectively too strong, or because we are physically incapable of continuing. We quit because our attention shifts from engaging in the present process to a desperate desire to escape it.
Once you allow your mind to focus entirely on the relief of quitting, the present effort becomes psychologically unbearable.
Exactly.
This is a massive paradigm shift. It's not the pain that stops us, it's the overwhelming desire for the absence of pain.
So well said.
So how do we actually shift this? If our brains are biologically wired to fear discomfort and our attention is so easily hijacked by the desire to escape, how do we create lasting, sustainable change?
I think the first and perhaps most difficult step for a perfectionist is accepting a very gentle but profound truth. Progress is inherently, unavoidably messy.
Oh, we hate hearing that. We want it to be clean.
We do, but it is not linear. It is full of interruptions, regressions, bad days, and awkward mistakes.
You do not need to restart from absolute zero every single time you stumble. You don't need to throw away the notebook just because you crossed out a word.
No, you just need to take a breath, turn the page, and continue imperfectly.
Continue imperfectly. I love that. But how do we find the motivation to do that?
To find the internal strength to continue imperfectly, we have to fundamentally change what motivates us to act in the first place.
Okay, let's talk about motivation then.
We have to look at a comprehensive study published in SciPost by researchers Woolley, George, and Fischbach. They tracked thousands of adults in both the United States and China over a full calendar year.
A huge sample size.
Massive. They wanted to see what actually kept people committed to their New Year's resolutions and long-term goals across different cultures. The data they uncovered was incredibly revealing, specifically regarding the mechanical difference between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation.
Let's make sure we define those clearly for everyone. Extrinsic motivation is when you are driven by external rewards or distant future outcomes, correct?
Yes.
Like telling yourself, I need to save money now so I can retire comfortably in 20 years, or I am going to run on this treadmill every day to lower my cholesterol and avoid a heart attack in a decade.
Exactly. It is the logical, long-term, important reasoning behind our massive goals. Now, the researchers found that, surprisingly, this extrinsic motivation completely failed to predict long-term success.
Completely failed.
Completely. People who set goals purely because they felt those goals were important or good for their distant future almost universally abandoned them as the year progressed.
Which goes against literally everything we are taught about goal setting. We are always told to keep our eyes on the prize, to print out a picture of our goal and look at it every day and focus entirely on the long-term benefit.
The neurological problem with keeping your eyes on a distant prize is that the human brain heavily discounts delayed rewards.
Because 10 years from now doesn't feel real to the brain.
Right. A healthy heart in 10 years or a funded retirement account in 20 years simply cannot compete with the immediate tangible comfort of staying on the couch and watching television today.
The couch is here right now. The retirement account is theoretical.
The brain prioritizes the immediate present. What the researchers found actually did predict long-term success was intrinsic motivation.
Okay, so what does that look like?
This means finding enjoyment, interest, or deep engagement in the process itself, in the present moment.
Can you get an example from the study?
Yes. In one of their specific follow-up experiments involving a health and fitness app, they found that people used the app 25% more often and walked an average of 1,250 more steps every single day, simply when the activity was framed to them as fun and surprising rather than health-focused and useful.
That is wild. It completely reframes how we should approach habits.
It really does.
So if you absolutely hate running, but you are forcing yourself to grind out 3 miles a day purely for heart health, you are almost guaranteed to quit when it gets cold or you feel tired, because the reward is a decade away, but the pain is right now.
Exactly.
But if you find a dance class or a local hiking trail or a sport that you genuinely enjoy doing in the moment, you will stick with it because the physical act itself is the reward.
The present moment feels good, which satisfies the brain's need for immediate gratification. You are no longer fighting your brain's evolutionary desire for immediate reward. You are actively utilizing it.
That makes so much sense. And this bridges perfectly into a core concept that both Dr. McCarthy's habit research and our identity-focused video source highlighted. Identity over intensity.
Oh, this is a crucial concept.
You have to stop trying to force intense, grueling bursts of behavior and start gently practicing a new identity, as the saying goes, which is so crucial to internalize. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall back to the level of your identity.
You don't rise to your goals, you fall back to your identity.
I really want everyone listening to let that sink in for a second. Let's think about this practically.
Okay, let's play it out.
If you fundamentally still see yourself as a messy, disorganized person who is just trying really hard to keep a clean house for a few weeks, the moment you get stressed at work or overwhelmed, you will fall right back to being a disorganized person. Your environment will reflect your core belief.
Right, because you haven't changed how you see yourself.
But if you start practicing the identity of someone who simply appreciates a calm, tidy space, and you do one tiny thing every day to honor that, like just wiping down the kitchen counter before bed, the behavior naturally follows the identity.
Behavior always follows identity. If you view yourself as an athlete, you train, even on the days you feel sluggish, because that is simply what an athlete does. It's not a violent war against your lazy self. It's just a natural expression of who you are.
So we have thoroughly unpacked the mechanics here. We know why we get stuck in the cycle of restarting. We know our brains are misinterpreting discomfort to protect us. And we know we need to shift our nervous system from extrinsic, fear-based punishment to intrinsic, aligned identity.
Yes, the theory is clear.
But let's get incredibly practical for the listener now. How do we actually build this new identity in the real world without triggering that cortisol-flooded fight-or-flight burnout? How do we start without accidentally setting ourselves up to quit 3 days later?
The absolute first and arguably the most vital step is to dramatically, almost laughably, lower your standards for what constitutes success in the very beginning.
I love this advice so much. It is officially scientific permission to underachieve.
In a highly strategic way, yes. Dr. McCarthy references the brilliant work of behavioral scientist B.J. Fogg from Stanford University, who advocates for riding the motivation wave by starting ridiculously small. He calls these tiny habits.
How tiny are we talking?
So small it sounds ridiculous. If your ultimate long-term goal is to do 50 push-ups a day, but the mere thought of that exhaustive effort feels overwhelming and makes your brain want to avoid it entirely, you need to lower the bar.
Okay, lower it to what, 10?
Lower. Do 5 push-ups.
What?
5. If 20 minutes of daily meditation feels like an impossible, boring chore that you keep putting off, sit down on the floor and do 1 single minute.
Make the physical actions so incredibly small, so undemanding that you literally cannot fail to do it.
Exactly. Because doing 5 push-ups or sitting with your eyes closed for 60 seconds establishes the identity of someone who exercises or meditates. It starts building that physical neurological pathway in the basal ganglia without triggering the amygdala's danger response.
You are essentially sneaking past your brain's ancient evolutionary defense mechanisms.
It's a psychological Trojan horse. Your brain doesn't view 1 minute of breathing as a threat to its vital energy reserves, so the amygdala stays quiet. It allows the behavior to happen.
And once that tiny, non-threatening habit is established, what's next?
Once it feels completely safe to your nervous system, you can use a highly effective behavioral technique called habit stacking.
Habit stacking. I've heard of this.
Yeah, your brain already has deeply ingrained, highly reinforced, thick neural pathways for things you do every single day without even thinking about them.
Like brushing your teeth or turning on the shower.
Or taking off your work shoes the moment you walk through the front door. Habit stacking simply involves tying your new, tiny behavior to one of those existing automatic routines.
So instead of writing a vague goal in your planner like, I will meditate at some point today, which requires you to remember to do it and find the willpower to start.
Which drains ego depletion.
Right. Instead, you say, after I pour my first cup of morning coffee, I will immediately sit at the kitchen table and meditate for 1 minute.
The physical act of pouring the coffee becomes the trigger for the new habit.
It completely bypasses the need for motivation, and it removes the cognitive load of having to remember to do it. You don't have to make a conscious decision. The environment itself prompts the behavior.
Yes. Another incredibly powerful tool for navigating this friction is temptation bundling, a concept pioneered by behavioral economist Catherine Milkman.
Temptation bundling. Okay, what is that?
This strategy involves pairing a challenging or less desirable habit that you need to do with a highly enjoyable activity that you want to do.
Like telling yourself that you are only allowed to listen to your absolute favorite true crime podcast or an audiobook you are obsessed with while you are walking on the treadmill or folding a massive pile of laundry.
Exactly. You are intentionally leveraging your brain's demand for immediate gratification to sustain a long-term goal.
The brain gets the immediate desired dopamine hit from the podcast.
Yes, which makes the physical act of walking or doing chores feel intrinsically rewarding in that exact moment. You aren't suffering through the walk for the promise of future health. You are genuinely enjoying the walk for the current entertainment.
That is so smart. And finally, I think we need to fundamentally rethink how we measure time and progress. We talked way back at the beginning about the fresh start effect and how New Year's Day or a birthday acts as this massive temporal landmark.
The locked door between the past and future.
Exactly. But relying on an annual reset is incredibly dangerous. If you set a massive New Year's resolution and you mess up in mid-February, you feel like the entire year is ruined. You feel like you have to wait 10 long months to try again.
Which is exactly why we should utilize what we can call micro-landmarks.
Micro-landmarks instead of yearly ones.
Right. Instead of focusing on a massive, high-pressure yearly goal, focus on monthly, weekly, or even daily resets.
So treat the start of a new week on Monday morning, or even just the start of a new afternoon after a terribly stressful morning, as a gentle opportunity to recalibrate.
It prevents the rigid, all-or-nothing thinking that perfectionism thrives on. If you eat a bad breakfast, the day isn't ruined. You don't need to throw the notebook away. You just recalibrate and make a different choice at lunch.
We have covered so much ground today. We've gone deep into the evolutionary biology of fear, the anatomy of the nervous system, and the psychology of why we struggle so hard to change.
We really went deep on the mechanics of it all.
But as we come to a close, if there's one single thing I want you to take away from this deep dive, it is this. You do not need to start over.
You really, truly don't.
You are not fundamentally broken because you lost momentum. You are not weak or lazy or lacking character because you got tired and needed to stop.
You are simply human, operating a very old brain in a very demanding modern world.
I want to bring back Dr. Lickerman's profound realization from his running story in Chicago.
The fact that quitting isn't the end.
Exactly. Quitting 100 times does not mean you are destined to be a quitter forever. Those 100 failures are not wasted effort. They are not permanent black marks on your permanent record.
Biologically speaking, they are the exact necessary experiences that build the preliminary neurological pathways, the emotional resilience, and the deep self-knowledge required to finally succeed on the 101st try.
No effort is ever truly wasted if you allow yourself to learn from the friction.
It all counts.
It all counts. Every messy attempt, every slip day, every moment of frustration, it is all part of the long, unpredictable, beautiful process of becoming who you are meant to be. Which brings us right back to that brand new notebook we talked about at the very beginning of our conversation.
The pressure to keep the pages pristine.
We put so much agonizing, suffocating pressure on keeping those pages perfect. But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. What if the version of you that finally succeeds isn't the flawless, hyper-disciplined planner with perfect handwriting who never makes a mistake?
What if it's not that person at all?
What if the version of you that succeeds is simply the messy, imperfect person who, after a really bad day, wakes up, looks at the crossed out mistakes on the page, and decides to just pick up the pen and continue writing exactly where they left off?
That is where true, lasting resilience lives. It is not found in the illusion of perfection, but in the quiet, persistent courage of continuation.
So take a deep, calming breath. Forgive yourself for the times you've stopped in the past. Put down the heavy, exhausting burden of starting over and just continue from where you are.